Dario Argento. Let's talk about this guy. Bird with a crystal plumage. It was shot in Italian, but the version that we're going to watch today is in English. This is Dario Argento's first feature film. He made it when he was about 30. And it has this roughness to it and this sort of youthful energy. It's really one of those movies where it's experimental. Looking at it today, it feels fairly mainstream. They were originally going to hire the Dr. No director, Terrence Young, to direct this. They were going to get this 55-year-old director who was famous for directing a bunch of James Bond films. And the budget wasn't big enough for him, you know? So then the movie went to their second choice, which was this unknown Italian director, Argento. And the studio tried to kick him off the production twice. They found the footage that he shot for this movie utterly repulsive. This is a rumor. I have no way of verifying if this is true, but allegedly there was a rumor that all of the secretaries who were working in the writer's office found the footage to be absolutely terrifying, and that's what the studio really wanted to go for. So the movie is very arresting. The movie intends to shock its audience. And it's really one of those movies where now we're going to start looking at how horror and sci-fi can influence other genres. One of the things that you'll notice watching today's film is that it actually isn't a straight-up horror film. It feels more like a mystery, like a detective film, like the director merged film noir with horror. This movie started this whole subgenre of horror. And I'm excited to talk about this today because I feel like this subgenre is coming back. And that subgenre is true crime movies. Are you guys familiar? They seem to be all the rage now. There's this whole industry with investigating the psychology of a killer. It's terrifying in the sense that it's almost a didactic how-to. If you were going to be a murderer, how would you do it? That's what makes this movie terrifying. You're following the detective around and you feel victimized just like he is, and you're solving this crime, but you're not one step ahead of the character like you are in Psycho. You're seeing it firsthand through his eyes. That blindness makes it a little bit more scary. What's even crazier about this film is that the Ted Bundy murders were just hitting the news when this movie came out. I think Ted Bundy killed his first victim in '68 or beginning of '69, right? And so what influenced what? We know from last week's film, Night of the Living Dead, that contemporary events, current events that are happening at the time that the director was alive will influence what they're creating in their art. So even though George Romero would say he wasn't trying to make a civil rights film, he couldn't help it. I feel like Dario Argento couldn't help but make this film because of the wave of serial killers that were committing all sorts of mayhem in big cities right around the late 60s and early 70s. There's a lot of scenes that take place at the police station where they actually walk you through how they're trying to catch the killer. This stuff is highly influential in terms of police procedural shows, The X-Files, The Wire, True Detective. They actually show black and white photographs of the killer's victims. And I think the black and white photographs juxtaposed against the actors who are shot in color, right, give it this sort of like realism. Vittorio Storaro shot Apocalypse Now, the conformist, master cinematographer, and of course, the composer who wrote the theme music to The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars, right? Lots of famous spaghetti westerns. They got their start on this movie as well. So you're watching one of the greats. And what's interesting about the filming techniques that you see in today's film is that they don't involve any special effects. They involve a lot of planning, they involve clever editing, but you don't need any special effects to pull these three techniques off. And the first one is juxtaposition, and I'll show you an example of direct and indirect. Direct juxtaposition is something that is planned with the cameraman and the editor. It involves juxtaposing two dissonant elements in the same frame. There's a figure in the distance. Okay, this is our main character. And we see this almost grotesque piece of art here on the left. This is an example of direct juxtaposition. Sometimes in horror movies, it's a knife or a gun that the character cannot see. If you have them together in the frame to communicate a single idea, this is what we call direct juxtaposition. And this is something that horror sci-fi directors use all the time. If you guys remember that scene from Insidious where the monster appears behind the protagonist's head, that's direct juxtaposition, right? Very stereotypically, usually it's a protagonist or the character who is about to lose his life is in the foreground, and the creature, the monster, is in the background, juxtaposed together. Okay, so it's almost like you're taking two collage elements and you're pasting them together to create irony and suspense. And then the second juxtaposition technique is indirect, creating a link between image A and image B. What is being depicted here? A terrified woman. And the shot after this shot is a knife going through a wall, like piece of corkboard, right? And it cuts back and forth between the woman and the knife, and the woman and the knife. And the reason this constitutes indirect juxtaposition is that your eye in this frame is on her face, right? So your eye is in the center of the frame. Where's the knife in the subsequent shot? Center of the frame, okay? Now this is something that every horror director will tell you is like basic filmmaking 101. If you want to produce the maximum intensity in terms of scares, you want to introduce the scary element right where the audience is already looking in the frame, okay? This is something that, was the case before Argento was a filmmaker, but Dario Argento was very concerned about how his movies would play to somebody sitting in the front row of the theater and to somebody sitting in the back. This is something that is of less concern to a lot of filmmakers now because everybody just streams stuff now, like you just basically, everybody just watches movies on their phone now and you basically adjust the distance yourself. But, back in the day, filmmakers had to think, well, is my movie gonna make sense to somebody sitting in the front row as opposed to somebody sitting in the back row, right? It's a very different visual experience, right? And so one of the ways that you can increase legibility and not make your audience tired is to keep their eye focused on the same part of the frame in subsequent shots. This is all done with the editor. So if you are a person who shoots your own content and you edit it together, keep this in mind because you have to think about what the shots are communicating and where the objects are oriented in the frame to pull this off. Hello everyone. If you like what you saw, please follow me using the social media links you see on the screen. If you would like to show more support, I will provide a link to my Patreon page as well as a link to purchase my new classroom textbook. Thank you so much again for visiting, and don't forget to subscribe.